All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the How the Hell Did We Wind Up Here podcast. I'm John the Fed. I am joined this time tonight by Heidi from the Unfiltered Rise podcast. If you haven't listened to her or listened to some of the ones that she's been on, I highly recommend it. Smart lady, comes from a maybe a different perspective, different point of views, just based on things in her life and, you know, work and religion and everything else. So gives you a lot to think about. So Heidi, thank you. Go and
Yeah.
introduce yourself to everybody. Say hi, and we'll get going.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah.
I am definitely feel like I've lived about 5 lives. So I decided, hey, why not try and help some people, right? That's what I do in general, because I'm a nurse. And so I'm a nurse. I'm a mom of 6. And actually, I am a grandma of 1.5. One's in the oven. And so we've got all that going on. And then I am an ex-Mormon, which is what I'm most known for. So I speak everything. Disclaimer for anything we get into tonight. Mormonism, a lot of people I still really love are in Mormonism. And it's not the people, it's just like the government. You get up so high and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yep. And it's the same thing for any church, not just.
And you're still living in Utah, right? So you're living in the land of.
Everybody that I do a podcast with is like, what? Do you want me to put this out? I'm like, yeah, it's okay. And they're like, are you gonna get like killed? I'm like, well, I will say this: I've never been suicidal. So if I'm unalived, it was not me.
Right.
So
if I shoot myself in the back of the head twice and then end up hanging myself, you know, there's a problem. So
please figure it out, my conspiracy people.
Exactly. Well, for those of you who are new to the show, the premise of this show is pretty simple. We all know this world's a messed up place. We can all identify a bunch of things that are wrong with it. But the community, at least in my opinion, has a history of not identifying how we got there. You know, we kind of throw around words like Masons or lizard people, which, by the way, she was just on a podcast talking about lizard people, but it's definitely worth a listen. But, you know, we throw around keywords, but we never talk about kind of what led up to it, even the fact that we might be culpable in it as well. So that's what this is about. That's what we're going to get into. Heidi's going to kind of tell us her version of where she thinks the world's gone mad.
Boy,
how it got there, and maybe talk a little bit about how we can get out of it as well. So Heidi, it's yours.
Awesome. All right. Well, a lot of times when I come on these shows, they want to know a little basic about Mormonism, and I'm not sure if you want to do that or if we go down this road.
This is your show.
Either way.
I've handed it over to you, so you do you.
So I was a Mormon in that I was born into the church. I was a Mormon for 34 years, and I've lived in Utah a good majority of my life. I definitely have had a lot of struggles in my life, and I've dealt with a lot of things that I would say are pretty horrific, but also I never gave up. And I feel like that kind of grit is missing in nowadays. Like I feel like the backbone of the grandpas and the grandmas it's a lot different than now, you know, grandpas and grandmas. It's changed. There's a big flop, and I don't know that it's good. The self-centeredness of people has really gotten it's amazing. Like people estranged from their parents, they don't care, they're living their best life, they're out doing their own stuff, like. And same thing with religion. I feel like it's all over the place. Like everything feels really, I don't know about you, but I feel less certain about this world than I've ever felt right now.
It depends on how you look at it, because I've always been certain this world was evil, and now I'm even more certain. So, you know, there's certain things, there's things I'm very much certain about, but you know, just kind of how things are going to play out. And, you know, you talked about, you've got 6 kids, you got 1.5 grandkids. I've got 2 kids as well. You know, I've got nieces, I've got nephews, and they're younger than my kids. Some of them are actually really young. And it's, you know, you look around and you're like, what is this world going to look like when you're my age? Because what are we leaving you?
Grandma and grandpa now, I feel like like, I don't know about you, but the majority of my youth okay, first, well, we'll just give this premise. My first 12 years were pretty bad. In fact, the state stepped in and took me away from my mom. So like that didn't happen back in the 80s and 90s. That
Right.
wasn't a thing. And so for that to happen to a mother, it was rough. And so we dealt with a lot of mental illness. We dealt with abuse from my stepdad. It was pretty horrific. And so we had this horrible situation, but after 12, I lived with my grandma. And my grandma wasn't old because she had 4 kids before she was 19.
Mm.
So she had her first one at 14. And so it's not like she probably could have just been my mom age,
Right.
normal mom age. And so, but everything we would do would circle around family. Like, okay, we're going to great grandma's today. We're doing this with Aunt so and so today. We're going to have a big dinner with all these people for birthdays or blah, 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 blah. And now I don't think that's the same thing anymore. I feel like
No.
people are busy and they don't like that. Grandmas now don't even look like grandmas. I mean, I know I don't look like one, but it's just, it's like they're busy and they don't want to be, bothered with that or have that family stuff. And I'm really family oriented, so that's big for me.
I think it's
With
partly that, but I think too, anytime I go to the grocery store now, anytime I go to the hardware store, anytime I go to Walmart, anytime I go to the feed store, there's people who are my grandparents' age when I was younger. There are men and women there now who have to work at 60,
yeah,
at 70.
yes,
They don't have
yep,
I don't even want to say the luxury, but they've never been given the opportunity to be able to work it, to stay home as well.
and be grandma. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, just be. And I feel bad because I feel like it's so critical for kids because, and Eddie Murphy used to do a funny skit about grandmama's house, big mama's house, and he's like, she was like more stern and like she'd be like, you
right.
better switch that light off, stuff like that, funny stuff. But also she'd have like the best goodies and
Yeah,
like,
well, my
all
love
that.
for cooking and my love for baking comes from my grandma. It doesn't come from my mom.
Right,
It comes from,
right.
my mom worked. My parents got divorced when I was young, fairly young, and so my mom had to work and all that. So after school, summers, whatever, I was with my grandparents. You know,
Yeah. And it was kind of a normal thing. That's not like it wasn't abnormal for a
no,
lot of kids. They were with their grandparents or their aunt or whoever.
yeah,
And so I feel like that camaraderie and that family unit is really missing. And then so I have a daughter that I'm estranged from, not by my decision at all. And she has the baby. That is my grandbaby, which
okay,
I've never seen her. I mean, I've seen a picture of her, but her husband just didn't like us. He met us 3 times, judged us solely on like what he could put together in 3 meetings, one of which was a quick breakfast, and called it good and, deemed
yeah,
that we weren't worthy and took her and moved far away. They live clear across the country. So I feel like it's more and more common because I'm in an estrangement group that this happens because they want to build their own family. They want to do their
right,
own things. They're not concerned about my feelings. They don't care. If it hurts me, not just me. Okay, if I'm the demon that they say I am, great. Okay, so if it's true and it's just me, that's one thing, but it was everyone. She
right.
like never came back here ever again. It's been 4 years,
Oh
you
wow,
know? So, I mean, I just feel like now people are making these nuclear families that are really small, like these little tiny, and it's all a part, in my opinion. The reason why I bring this up is it's a part of the destruction of the family units so that we don't have the strength in numbers anymore.
right,
It's the same thing they've always done, trying to remove males from the home, trying to, break up
yeah.
families,
Well,
all of it.
it I've never thought of it like this before, but what you're saying kind of rings true. And again, the premise of this whole podcast is how did we get to this point? And you can
Yes.
look back of, 1970s, 60s, 50s, there was not the technology that we had from the 80s going forward. So, family time, game time was you got around you played cards, you played Monopoly, you played Go Fish, you played, whatever as a
Make
family.
a pie
That's
together, bake a
yeah.
cake together.
As
Yeah.
soon as they started introducing video games, guess what happens? Little Johnny and
Yeah.
little Sally go to their room and they can be
Yeah.
all by themselves. And then cable, the TV, mom and dad are watching that. And so the separation was just, people look at me cross-eyed when I say it's been planned for a long time. And then
You're not
this is
wrong.
like, okay, in the 80s, I got a Nintendo when it first came out. And guess what I did as much as I could? I was in my room. But now it's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, little Jimmy, little Sally, whoever, they're on their phones. As their
Mm-hmm.
phone.
Yep.
Everybody in the house is an individual instead of, like you were saying, it's not a family unit anymore.
Well, and sorry, my asthma is really bad today.
Okay.
And what do they push? What do they push in society? YOLO, like
Right.
live your best life. It's all about you. Do you, boo boo?
Do you?
Like
Yep.
all this stuff is like very me centered. And if you go back to Aleister Crowley, what does he say? In the end age, we will all be superstars in our own right. We will
True.
all be our own star. And so the social media has made it that way where, okay, it's all about me. Look at me. This is about me. This isn't about, anybody else. And
Right.
so I feel like that's so played into the breakdown of society because no longer are we concerned about, even doors. Like I teach my kids as a nurse, like, hey, if you see an older person, I don't care, male or female, you hold the door,
Yep.
you help them if you see they need help. And
You
I've
stand
had
up, give them
some,
your seat. You do,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
any of that. And my son is good about it, but I have a couple of the younger kids, because we have a blended family that used to not, it wasn't out of spite. It was literally not taught. And they would like shut the door. And like one time it was on a lady with a walker. And I'm like, hey, you can't do that. But to
Yeah.
them, it wasn't mean, none of that. It was literally a non-thought process. Like it didn't connect.
Right.
And so they want us to be that way because why? If we band together, then they're in trouble because they want us at odds at all times. They
Yeah.
want us black, white, male, female, whatever it is, it's always a thing.
Well, and
Everybody's
it's taught
always
it's
at
taught
odds.
from such an early age too. I realized this, I don't know, not too long ago, and I've told a few people this, that it seems to boil down to red and blue. You're red and blue, Democrat, Republican, red and blue, Coke or Pepsi. You know, there's all of these things that separate. Even if you're a fan of football, the Pro Bowl, when they wear their jerseys, they're AFC is red, NFC is blue, and it's always red against blue, and it just primes you for when you turn 18, you've got to make a decision. Are you red or are you blue? You
Well,
know,
and it's such a delusion because here's the funniest part is we're all just in a play because they're selected, not elected. Anybody that makes it, and I don't care who they are, you can think they're the best person ever. You can think Trump's your savior. You can think, and I'm not happy with Biden's presidency has sucked. Okay. But here's the thing. Is it by design? Because then there'll be a great savior. Is this on purpose? Like we have to step back and say, okay, this was purposeful. This was a decision made a long time before this occurred. And if anybody's at the top echelon, now I'm not talking about your sheriff, local, or your mayor, or maybe somebody that's great. That's fine. But you don't understand once it gets to politic level, there is either blackmail, there's leverages, there's money, there's connections. I don't care who you are. Like it's just the way it is,
well, the thing is if we know the names and we know, whoever it is involved, then they're not the ones doing it. They're
Right.
just
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
100%.
they're
You're
just the
so
pawn.
right.
They're the pawns in the game. They're the ones who are like who are they're the controlled, not even opposition. They're just being controlled by,
They're just the scapegoat. They're
yeah,
just
and
the
that's the thing. We
scapegoat.
we know the names like
Yeah.
the Rockefellers and the Morgans and the Chases.
Mhm.
Granted, they have done some pretty heinous things, but you know what? We know their names, so they're not really the ones making those decisions.
No. Well, because my grandpa, and so my family was pretty colorful, even the good ones that took me. Um, so my grandpa was a one percenter and my uncle was a sundowner. So this is
You
like
want to explain?
motorcycle.
You want to explain those real quick for those who
So
don't know them?
very similar to Hell's Angels.
Right.
One percenters actually are I think one of the most violent back in the day. I don't even know if they're still around, but um, and then Sundowners is basically almost identical to Hell's Angels. Out here, there's more of them than the Hell's Angels. So my grandpa would always tell to me, like, if you know somebody's name behind something, then they're the punk. Like nobody knows with the mob, like, yeah, if they're throwing out the mob boss's name, they're
Right.
not the boss of anything because
Yep.
real players, real bosses, real gangsters, he used to be like, you would never know who they are because
Yeah.
everything is done to protect them. And you wouldn't even, nobody knows because he used to tell me, you know how to keep a secret between two people, right? Do you know?
Make sure one of them isn't alive.
Yeah, kill the other one. Yeah, he
Yeah.
used to say that. And I mean, he was kidding. I hope so.
Sort of. I mean, there's a lot of truth behind it, though.
I
Just
know.
ask,
I'm like,
just ask the Clinton's
oh,
friends.
yeah, well, or the laptop, the laptop friend. But like all of this stuff goes back to, you have to go back and remember that everything they're doing for you is a show and it's all controlled and they manipulate people so easy. It's like we're little puppets on a string. And once you cut the string and understand, and I tell people all the time, and it sounds bad, I guess, because I say I'm one step away from an anarchist. But what I mean by that isn't that I love this country. I'm patriotic to the people that have served. My whole family's been in the service. Like, I don't mean those people. I mean at the top level. Like,
Yeah.
I don't believe in any of them. And I think they all go have dinner afterward and laugh it up. And they're like, ha ha, ha,
Oh, I'm sure.
I,
I'm sure. And they
yeah.
drink their adrenochrome smoothies.
Mm-hmm. And
So
I
no,
think
and I
it's
agree.
controlled.
I'll tell people too that I'll claim to be an anarchist, but my version of anarchy is just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah.
let me find my own community. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I told people it really needs to get back to is there just needs to be different communities. And if your values don't line up with our community's values, I guarantee you there's another community down the way. They have the same values that you do, you know. So if you want to live in a dry community where there's no booze and whatever else, that's not going to be my community, but it will there. I'm sure there's one, down the road. There's probably a bunch in Utah.
Well, you
So
can find anything in anything. I mean,
yeah,
you can go find some furries to live with if you really want to, I mean, and it's true.
only in the
And
wintertime,
right.
only when it's
And,
cold.
and I'm like, this is so funny that people will fight to the death or divide families or argue about things that are so hysterically ridiculous. I'm
Yep.
like, you do know that they're going to have dinner later together. You do know that they run in the same circles. Like you do know most of them are related. Like
Yeah.
if you get down the heritage lines, like Madonna's related to Obama, I
Right.
mean,
Well, and
it would,
all the
yeah.
all the president, and this is pretty common knowledge. I think everybody knows it, what I'm going to say, just in case there's one who doesn't. But all the presidents are related to some king from England in
Mm-hmm.
like the
Yeah.
1400s.
Well,
You know
because they have the divine right to rule. Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
So
And they don't make mistakes. I mean, this is something that we have no control over. And I'm not trying to, I guess we're coming off kind of black pill, but here's the problem is too many people put their faith in a man. And herein lies the issue. In the Bible, what does it say? Every man is a liar. I don't think that means that literally every man is a liar all the time. It means that men can be deceivers of people, even if they have the best intentions.
yep.
Sometimes they start things with every wholesome intent and get led astray by women or by, you know, drugs or by money or
Money
by,
or yeah,
I say men right now, but it could be vice versa. Like I'm not saying men or women. And I always look at King David, like God loved him very much. He called him his beloved. And how many times did he just keep screwing up
that's the
over
thing.
and over?
You look at Hebrews has the roll call of faith, and you look at everybody who's in there. Whether you believe they're real or not, they're like they were worse. They were more worse than they were good in
Yeah.
a
Yep.
lot of ways. So
Yeah. Yep. And you just step back and go, there's nothing new under the sun. This
right,
has been going on for a long time. So take a breath. Don't split up your family over it. Here's some good advice, step away from it as if it were not the most important thing because you have no control. We can
right,
only control our life. Like you said, I just want to be left alone. Okay, here's the thing. We have to make our own communities, like you said. We have to make our own people, like you said. We have to find our own tribe and say, okay, this is my people. And sometimes you may not 100% agree with another tribe, but later, if they have similar values, we may all be called to be together, which I truly
yep,
believe.
no,
So
absolutely,
we have to be kind, and that has gone out the window. Kindness and grace has gone out the window. Like
yeah,
people look for any little, like, oh, my mom is a narcissist, she's just a terrible person, write her off. Like maybe your mom had a lot of pain, and like my mom, okay, we'll use her as an example. My mom didn't protect me. Could she protect me up against an abusive guy that was almost killing her, almost killed her multiple times while she's having mental breakdowns and all these problems? Did she have the capability to do anything for me? No.
right,
But is it her fault? No.
yeah,
It's the circumstance that was. Now people say she could just leave. She didn't have anywhere to go, and she was in a state all alone with no family. And we did the whole women's shelter multiple times, and eventually she did get out. But here's the problem. People put that guilt onto people, and then what does my mom do for her whole life? She still to this day is like, and I'm so sorry. And I'm like, Mom,
yeah,
if I have enough grace in my heart to say it's okay once, that's all. Because I hope Jesus does that for me.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. My mom was the same way. My dad was a piece of work, and we'll just leave it at that. And she had every opportunity to leave, but when somebody's psyche breaks, you
Yep.
know, it's like they're not making rational decisions, right?
No,
And it's
no. She's living in fear. Yeah,
yeah,
she's living in
or
fear.
I'm not saying my mom thought this, but you hear lots of women who just think they deserve it, or it's just
Or
it's
she
their
doesn't
fault.
think she can do it on her own,
Yeah,
or she's scared, or
yep,
and she has kids to think of. And so whatever everybody says, okay, you got to put your kids first. So then you have this guilt too, like, oh, if I leave, then my life won't be as good and my children
right,
will have more problems. Like, so ultimately we can't be in their mind for those choices, and we have to remember, like a therapist once told me this, and it was so helpful to me because I was angry at that time with her. And he said, your mom was like a little chihuahua, and your stepdad was like a big giant pit bull. And even if she tried with all her chihuahua might, she's not going to take down a pit bull. It's just
right,
not going to happen. And so she did what she could here and there, but she had to fight like different because she knew by being submissive, just like what does a dog do that's small?
yep,
It'll lay down and show its neck. It's a sign of submission. Why do they do that? So that it shows they're no threat. I think a lot of times, whoever's being abused, men or women, get into that situation, and that's how they react because they feel like they literally have no other choice.
right.
So and we're the collateral damage. Like, I'm sure you weren't meant to be that. I wasn't meant to be that.
No,
They
but
loved us.
I've always
Yeah.
looked at it as if me going through it kept somebody else from going through it, then
Mhm.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I know how I've turned out,
Yep.
and I made it through on the other side where there's a lot of people who don't. So
And everybody that goes through great suffering, it changes you.
Yeah.
If it's physical, mental abuse, or just like sickness, whatever it is, that for me was a big, huge thing for my awakening because it changed my whole makeup of my
Well,
brain. I don't feel like I'm the same at all.
I think that was one of the whole things for 2020 as well.
Oh, that's when it happened
Because
for
yeah,
me.
because people there's a shift in people's makeup. Like you kind of what started this whole conversation. People were more angry. They didn't put up with stuff. They didn't. They only were thinking about themselves, and it's still continued. And I'm guessing I haven't studied the brain. I haven't studied a whole bunch of
Right.
electricity like our electrical stuff. But when something like that shifts, I'm assuming it's probably easier for a lot of other natural things to change inside you as well.
Absolutely, because if you are living, okay, so they did an experiment far before 2020 where they made people, this was like either I think it was the CIA, where they made people afraid for a certain amount of time and they told them a lie. And then after this certain amount of time, I think it was 90 days was all, they said, okay, we're just kidding. Like, say the sky is purple and then they come back and say now the sky is actually blue, they will never change their way of thinking. They will always think the sky is purple, even though the person that lied to them, told them, showed them, got proof, took out a chart and said, look at this, blah blah blah. It will never change it because that decision was implanted with fear.
Right.
And that was what that was about. Well, it was it was a lot of things, but that was part of what that was about. And so I think that they wanted to see how well that would really work on a mass scale. Like,
Oh yeah,
will
very
this really
much.
work? Yeah.
Will
And
they really follow us? And the majority of them did.
oh, my community was the LDS community came out, their president of their church came out in their church and told everyone to get it. And
Really?
yes, that they
Wow.
should go and get it, including their children. And I'm like, you, sir, like I already have issues with that church, but you really just stepped over the line because you don't know somebody's health or well-being. That should be a private decision
That
between
just
them
showed
and
that
their
just showed
doctor.
how much religion is involved with a pharmaceutical,
Oh, they
whatever.
own stock. They
Oh, I
own
know they
stock.
do. I know they do.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
that's why we can't get the medical marijuana bills here without a great deal of sticky tape. It's extremely expensive, and recreational, it's so against the law. And I'm like, this is ridiculous, but that's because they own a lot of stock in pharmaceuticals.
yep,
So they want
yeah,
you on whatever else they got. And this
same
is coming
reason.
from a nurse. I mean, I've been a nurse for 24 years and I still believe in medical interventions. I'm not saying I have asthma, like I have to take
Right.
inhalers, like I have certain things that like allergies really bad. Um if I didn't have certain things, I would die. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just a thing. And
yeah,
so I get it, but you have to know that when it's a chronic thing and it may not be the best thing for you.
right.
You
Yeah,
need to do your work and you're studying and say, okay, if it's a chronic liver problem, different talk we're going to have. But
right.
if you're on chronic mood medication, maybe there's other ways to get better.
Yeah.
Exercise releases amazing amounts of endorphins. Certain foods do. There's 100 other things that can help you,
Well,
but they don't want to.
there's so many more
Yeah.
natural things that are out there as well. I tell this to anytime I get a chance because I've let's see, it's probably COVID was what 3 years ago, so this is probably 4 or 5 years ago. Um, my youngest got a huge rash on his leg, and no clue what caused it, where it came from. Popped up just all of a sudden, and it's late at night, and I think it's on like a Saturday or a Sunday. I'm like, I don't want to go to the
Right.
bar. This is going to cost like $350,
A ton of money.
you know.
Yeah.
And so I texted my buddy, and I was like, or no, I got online. I was like, I'm going to find a natural remedy to cure this. I'm going to find something, and I'll tell anybody who listens. I'm like, it sounds weird, but the remedy was get a potato, blend it up, put it over the rash, wrap it in saran wrap, have them sleep in it, and in the morning the rash will be done. The rash will be gone, and it
Wow.
was gone. And ever since then, I've been like, this
Huh.
is there is something out there about being able to heal yourself with nature. You know,
Yes. I knew about oatmeal, but I hadn't heard the potato. That
yeah.
one's new.
He screamed like a he screamed, and
Oh,
well, it's because all the starch in the potato was going through.
yeah.
It's done,
Hurting.
done.
Hmm.
Like the next morning, he woke up and it was gone. I'm like, you know what? Anytime I can from now on, I'm going to go with trying to
Hmm.
heal it
Yep.
naturally. Now,
Well, and
granted,
there's, yeah, some things you can't, but like there's
my kids, yeah,
Manuka
or my kids get
honey.
strep
There's,
throat. I'm going to go to the doctor and get bubblegum flavored medicine
right,
because
right,
it's going to take it away because my kids aren't going to be in pain, sort of thing.
right.
So it's just you know,
You got to weigh it depending on what you're dealing with. And even,
right,
I mean, some people, like I've seen things even as weird as like sun gazing for eyesight and
yeah.
different stuff. And I mean, I'm not telling anybody to just go willy nilly do that. You better do your research. But I'm just saying there are other things out there that they do not promote on purpose because they want you
Are
addicted to the system.
Are you familiar with? How about this one?
Everything. Yep. Same thing with medical field. It's all, what is it now? It's all professionals that are in their own little specialty.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, that's great. But like also you're missing things because I'm such a well-rounded nurse because I've done just almost everything. I've gone into different areas and it just happened to be that I float. And so I will be here one day and there one day and there one day and there one day. And some people don't like that, but I do.
Right.
And so I was able to learn like this and this and this. Okay, so when I see a patient, I'm thinking critically, like, yeah, but what about this? What about that? It could be this, it could be that, where they might only think about the one thing they're trained in, like their heart, and you're
Or
gonna miss it.
what medicine is going to give them a trip next year?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so
Allegedly, not saying that doctors think this way.
no,
We have to put a
allegedly,
disclaimer on that too.
there's no kickbacks, but one doctor had a boat with the name Kickback on it back. Yeah, back with that whole scandal with Purdue. So,
Right.
anyways, these things, they've made movies about them. Like you can go watch the show on Netflix right now. What's it called? About the Purdue scandal, and I can't remember right now. But there's a whole movie about this. Like it's like a series,
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, what happened there? Or what happened with Tuskegee? Or what happened with the Native Americans? Or what
Right.
happened with, okay, so you're telling me the government loves us so much. And who did this whole disease hit? That was what really struck me in 2020 when I started studying things. And I always say I started listening to The Last American Vagabond, Ryan Christian. He's amazing. He documents everything at the bottom and he gives you a link to each study that he went through so you can go read it. Well, medical professional, that's extremely important for me because I can decipher that. Like maybe that's not great for just some people that don't know what all that means, but for me, it was important. And so
Right.
I loved it. And so it gave me this wealth of knowledge. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't add up. Like this isn't working. And so I'm going, why are they pushing it then? Like, what's happening with this? I've never seen anything be pushed through like this. Like, what's this? What's that? And so the more I started studying as a critically thinking nurse, the more I'm like, Mayday, push the abort button,
Right.
where's the abort button? And they're pushing it through. And I'm thinking to myself, like, no, this can't be happening. They're really not going to do this, are they? And so when they started making things mandatory, and I was just shocked. And I knew there were going to be a lot of people affected because a lot of people I know would have lost their jobs. I would have lost my job.
Yeah.
The one thing that saved me is my little irritant tonight is my asthma is so very bad and I have so many EpiPen allergies that they were like, yeah, I don't think we better, she might die. Like she
Right.
might just and I was never so happy. I was like, yay.
And then she's
And
going to
then
come
so
back and haunt us.
yeah, I was like, woohoo. So
Well,
I never
it's
gave
just
one, never received one.
yeah. I heard you
Yep.
say that the other day when I was
Yep.
listening to Drew's show, and I was like, that's amazing. I don't know if I've heard anybody anybody say that. Partly because most of the nurses I know and people in the medical field,
They
like,
believe in
we
it.
got to
Yeah.
do it.
Yep.
We got to
We
do
got to
it.
save grandma. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. Why are you worried about that? That the transmission doesn't even work that way for
Right.
anything other than maybe chicken pox, you know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's very few things that are that contagious where you're going to hurt somebody else if you're not vaccinated. If you have the true disease, you could hurt grandma. But if you don't have the disease and you're just fine, you're not. And it made
Yeah.
no sense to me.
Well,
And then when they started blowing up all the variants, I was like, everything mutates.
right.
That's not new. There,
Yeah. That's
this is
why,
not new.
that's
Yeah,
apparently why we can't cure the flu, because
right.
it's a
Yeah,
common cold.
or figure out which flu shot to give every single year.
Right.
They just guess, you know. And so I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, none of this makes sense, and they're really blowing it up. They're making it like this is really important, you know, like this variant, blah blah blah, is like blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And I'm like, and my mom would call me and she's like scared because she has autoimmune issues.
Yep.
And I'm like, Mom, this is normal. Like that happens. It's okay. And she would get scared. I'm like, don't let that happen.
Well, that's,
You know,
that's
and
the thing is, and that's what I think the biggest thing was. And I don't know if that's what caused, I can't believe that's what caused people to be so angry now, but so many people turn to,
the masks.
well, not
They
even
were
that, but well, the
made
mask,
them
but
angry.
they turn to living in fear. You know,
It's
it
true.
just, you know, like my mom, my stepdad has Fox News on like 30 hours a day. You know, I know there's only 24
Yeah.
hours a day, but somehow he gets an extra 6.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
and it's on all the time. So she's there listening to it too. And it just caused, she just, the strong woman that I knew growing up was not that once 2020 hit, because her whole life was just fear.
The paranoia.
She's almost agoraphobic now because she
Oh
just
wow.
is afraid to go outside, kind of thing. And it's
Mm.
just, there's so many stories of people that are like that, of just like they just shifted something in them again,
Well,
something in them shifted.
and the fear and the shift for the kids has been drastic. Like
Yeah.
my son, I said to my son, he's almost 16. I said, "Hey, why don't you guys go out, like very much like in a group, like go to a haunted house or go to the movies, like, or go to the mall, or like we were always doing something when we were young, right?"
Yep.
And he said, "Well, we're on the phone." And I said, "Well, how do you get a girlfriend or whatever and get serious?" Oh, this is what they say when they kind of like somebody. They're just talking.
Right.
They're
We're just
talking.
talking.
Uh-huh. And I'm like, but what, wait,
We're just
why wouldn't
talking on
you go?
Snapchat.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you go out? And then he's like, well, why would I go out when I don't know if I like her enough to go out? I'm like, because you don't know. And then he would be like, no, that's a waste of my time. And they stay home.
Yes.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
And
Now
I'm like,
you're like, I hope she doesn't date you. I hope she finds
yeah,
something.
yeah. Well, and it's not just him, it's
No, it's
everyone. They
everybody though.
all are.
It
Yeah,
really
it's
is. But
so weird.
that goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of
Yeah.
everybody now is, it's an individual. You know, it's,
Mm-hmm.
I spent the weekend with my youngest and his best friend, and they're together like in person, but
They're on their phones.
they're on their phones and they're sending
Yeah.
Snapchats to each other. They're like 3 feet away. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Sort of
You're
thing.
like, stop that.
It just kind of, you know, it's
Even with the young kids, I have a daughter that's 9. They'll play, and she has gigantic playhouses for Barbies, but they are on the iPad playing houses of Barbies. And I'm like, why? There's only one iPad and you guys are fighting over it.
right.
And then there's these big Barbie houses. Go play in your room. And she's like, no, it's not the same. I can decorate the walls. But I get that. I get like, that's cool. You can change the color every 5
Yeah.
minutes. But like also, like I don't know that that's good for your brain.
You know, I think it's, so Drew said it on I don't remember. He was on it. He was on, there's a podcast out there called Are We Content, or Are We Content, depending on how you read that word. And it's with Chud and Moral Bob, or the Perpetual Skeptic, Space is Faking Gay, whatever, you know, he's calling himself at the time. Drew said that, so like Heidi, your generation, my generation, maybe, you know, my sister's generation, we're all the generations that grew up without technology, so we know how to
Yeah.
put it down.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids' generations don't know how to put it down because they have not grown up without it. It is
Yes.
in their hands. Even the school district that both my boys, well, my youngest goes to now, and both when my before my oldest graduated, they're a 1-to-1 campus, which means every student in the district got an iPad from the time
Oh,
that they
wow.
from the
Yeah.
time they
Yeah.
were
My kids
kids.
all have laptops. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that is just it's being, and I understand why. Like it gives a lot of stuff that teachers can do. It makes you don't have to buy textbooks and all that, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's just pushing them into a corner. They have no clue how they're going to be able to get out from that.
Well, it also makes it so that they can change whatever they want at any time. And that is terrifying. Like if they don't like that page in the book, like delete,
True.
and that's concerning because then at what point I already feel like we're Mandela all the time. And then on top of it, you got selective, deletion. And
Right.
so what is really real? Like sometimes my son will say, I feel like I'm in a video game, so, and I'm like, yeah, I can get it. Like, yeah, I get why. And,
Yeah.
and he understands because he does other things, which is great. Cause like he, this is going to be funny. He plays hockey, but he also crochets.
Although you
We
know
were
what, maybe that helps him with his hand-eye coordination
Yeah.
or
And
something.
2020 happened, and I was trying to go through the list of crafts to do with bored children.
Wow.
And he was good at it and he was fast at it. I was like, wow, you're really good at this,
Yeah.
And so he likes it and he makes things all the time. Like he's made full on shawls, blankets, everything. So he will put down the phone to do that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, so grateful it's anything. Yes, of course, at sports we do that, but
Right.
like it gives him one more thing at home that he can do. Like
Yeah.
that you can create. And I don't care if it's even coloring. Like sometimes to decompress, I like to color because it's mindless, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to think about it. And it's not my phone, and I can't have my phone if I'm doing it, So
Right.
it's kind of a nice decompression, but it could be anything that requires,
Yeah.
your full attention. But it's just like, or your hand coordination at least, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's so important for them to get those breaks to step away. It's just not, it's not healthy for them to be how involved that they are.
No, but even as parents, we probably don't set the best example because I love to read, and a lot of times there's books I want to read that come up free on the Kindle. So what am I doing?
Yeah,
I'm on my phone or my iPad reading a book, or
right.
and with my kids
But
too,
and they don't know that probably. They
they
just
don't
see
know,
you
or they just
on
are, or
on the
they
phone.
just
Yeah.
well, that's the thing. So, um, few episodes ago, my son and two of his friends, we recorded an episode, all three, all of us
Oh,
together. They came on, they wanted to talk about social media and the importance that it plays in their
oh,
lives. And I came to
yeah.
realize for them though, there's a difference between being on social media and just looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Just
So
scrolling.
just scrolling.
Yeah.
Scrolling to
Yeah.
them is not being on social media. It's like me when I was a kid going through my baseball cards or reading a
Yeah.
comic.
It's mindless.
It's
Uh-huh.
mindless, and they're just scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. If
Yep.
they're on social media, then that means they're taking Snapchat, sending them out, or they're
Right.
Twitter.
Active.
They're they're active on it. Sort of. I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was really interesting because I'd never correlated the two of. I'm like, why are you always
Hmm.
on social media? I'm not on social media.
Yeah.
No, I'm just scrolling on TikTok.
I'm
That,
not I'm not on it.
I'm not
Yeah.
on it. I'm just interacting with, or I'm just.
That
And that
makes
was
sense.
it does, and it was so interesting because I never looked at it that way before.
Well, and it's an instant dopamine release, and people don't understand fully. Like they did this because they had the knowledge to do this. This was not a mistake. This was, and also that whole story about how it was founded, like Facebook, is bull crap. It was all done by DARPA. Like, come on, and it was handed down to certain people to develop it, period.
Right.
Like it's just the way it is. And so, and if you trace the family bloodlines back on all of the people that run all of the things, you'll find all your answers. So it's amazing to me that they push like this dopamine hit, and then like if you get away from it, how do you feel inside if you didn't get some likes today? How do you feel inside if you're not getting, reaffirmed? And they're constantly being reaffirmed,
Well, and even something even more simple is, I always am feeling my phone vibrate in my pocket when it's not vibrating. Like I can,
yeah,
I
yeah,
can, for some
I
reason
get
it feels
that.
like it's vibrating, and I put my head back. I'm like, okay, nothing just happened. Why did it feel like
Nothing.
it was vibrating? And it's the
True.
same thing. I'm
Yep.
sure they go through the same thing as well, or they hear a phone vibrate and they got to check because what if it was my phone?
Mm-hmm. Yep. What
There,
if? Yep.
and there's even a new app that's out. Well, I'm sure it's not new, but I only found out about it where they'll send out a just like a picture to their group of friends or whatever, and their friends only have 5 minutes to like it
To
after it's been
respond.
sent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after 5 minutes, it's gone, whether they looked at it or not. So that's all. That's another one of
Wow.
those things that's just pushing them to
Pushing the time frame, like to
pushing the time frame.
respond.
Always being on your phone. Always.
Wow. That's why I'm always so grateful. I live in an area that has mountains. We've always camped. We've always gone and done things. And I'll tell you, a couple years ago, we went and they started doing more like Wi-Fi at these places, and I was not happy because they were just sitting there around the campfire on TikTok,
Yep.
and I'm like, put your phone away. Talk. We normally talk, and my son came home from that particular camp time, and he said, I didn't like that. It wasn't fun because we didn't do the funny things we normally do,
I
like to engage with each other.
Yeah. Interactions a lost art.
Oh, it's so, and I'm so happy with my youngest, especially because she has so severe ADHD. I put her in mainstream school, but then 2020 happened, and she was kindergartner in 2020, and it wasn't good for her. And she doesn't learn anything or retain anything off a computer. She doesn't. We've tried and tried and tried and tried. It doesn't matter. It doesn't go in her brain.
Right.
And so if you get a book and do it, she's a lot better. But they want to do everything on the computer. And so I yanked her out because I did the medications. It made her really weird. We tried all the different kinds. I didn't like it. It made her weird. It wasn't her. And so maybe that was just my kid. Other people have a fine problem with that's great. You do what you need to do for your family. I'm not for or against. But for my choice for my child, it was not okay. And she's a rapid metabolizer, so it would wear off by 2 p.m. and she would have this huge crash and become like, literally, I'm like, she's a gargoyle in the corner. Like, it was horrible. So I'm like, she was like Gollum with her tablet.
Right.
She was like, ah. I'm like, oh, you're scaring me. And so I was done with it. And so we took her off, and the school was just so hard to work with. They were constantly like, she was so good when she was. I'm like, okay, I know, but like, she wasn't herself either. Like,
Right.
you're minusing the good parts of who she is, and she's gonna run the world one day. Like, this kid is smart. I told her one day, I said, you know what a CEO is? And she's like, no. So I explained to her, you've got to go through these steps to be the boss. You can't just be the boss. You have to earn to be the boss. So I'm explaining it to her. So I guess she went to school the next day. She was only 7. And she told the teacher, I'm not doing any of the work because I'm going to be a CEO one day. And I was like, so I got a phone call. They're like, did you tell her she didn't have to do her work because she's going to be a CEO one day? And I was like, oh my
Oh,
God.
that's funny.
I'm like, this kid is smart,
Right.
So, but very unruly, but not mean. Just doesn't want to do. She
Yeah.
wants to go talk or hug people or chat, and it's not anything nefarious or bad. It's all cute, but like, it's disruptive, and I get it. So we took her out. We put her into a Montessori school, and it has been the best thing we've done. I was scared because I was like, yeah, but what if she doesn't learn how to read right? Or what if this or what if that?
Right.
And the lady that does it happens to be my neighbor. And she said, listen, do you know in Sweden and other countries, they don't even send their kids to actual school till they're almost 9? And I was like, what? And she's like, no. And reading in like other countries where even the people that are like off the grid, like Aboriginal type people, where they have no contact with the outside. They learn their language, like the reading of their people,
Right.
by mouth and by teaching, because it's so important. Kids will learn language. She's
Yeah.
like, it happens. And I was so scared, but I thought, okay, whatever. We've tried this other way. It's not working, you know? So we do it because, well, also she went to school one day and told her teacher, she was 8 then. And this teacher and her, there was no escaping the teacher because she was the same special ed teacher, no matter what grade. Okay. So we're not escaping. And she looked at her one day and she said, I know why your husband left you. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I got a phone call. Got a phone call about that one. I was like, gosh, I don't know why she knew that the husband left, but she did. So I guess the teacher shouldn't have shared. But
Right.
I'm like, well, you can't say she's dumb because that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But
Did you ask the teacher if she was upset because she said it, or she was upset because it was true?
might be true. Yeah, I
Right.
was like, oh my gosh. So I yanked her out. And like I said, she does 2 days a week that are kind of normal classes, but she has one day a week that's a nature class. And they take her and they do these hikes and they teach them like what mushrooms you can eat and what mushrooms you can't eat and like all this cool nature stuff.
That's
And
nice.
she loves it. She loves it. And I'm like, I think a lot of times it's just finding what they're passionate about.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
you have to find the niche, right?
And you have to find the way to teach them too. I'm married to a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got family who are teachers, so I choose my words very carefully. But
Yeah,
not it's it sucks that every child has to be taught the same. Because
right,
there are some children who just learn differently. We
right.
my youngest was diagnosed with he's diagnosed with ADHD. I don't know if it's necessarily ADHD or just, there's a lot he wants to do in a short amount of time. So, and we were really blessed with the fact that he's had teachers who understand that they're like, look, if you got to get up and walk around, get up and walk
It's
around.
okay.
Just don't
Right.
walk around and go help other, because what he would do is he'd get up and walk around, but he'd go help other people with their stuff. And they're like, no,
Oh,
you
how
can't do
funny.
that. You just got to get up and walk around kind of thing.
Right.
So,
Because yeah, don't be
and they
distracted type
understood
thing.
like for some students, I can't teach you the same way. And that's the same
Mm-hmm.
way that, back in the 1800s, apparently I didn't live back then, so I don't know, but from what I
Right.
understand, their classrooms were set up more in a circle versus in rows,
Mm,
because you know, circles encourage conversation. Circles encourage people to
true.
call to each other, where if it's in rows, you're not necessarily going to get that. You're going to get the teacher more kind of dictating, the
Right.
versus
Dictatorship.
interaction from the kids, sort of thing. So
Yeah, that makes total sense because I think that just the art of just being, and here it goes back to what we started with, empathy. The empathy has left in so much, and it's not just with teaching. It's like nurses. I always say to everybody, I've been a nurse 24 years, and people are like, well, when will you stop? And I'm like, when I become Nurse Ratchet. Because when my whole goal is like to make your worst day ever worse,
right,
then that's enough. You can't do that to people. And if you're here and you're trying to help somebody, but you're being so cruel or not understanding. And I work in psych now. I'm out of the medical part and I work in psych. And so it's a completely different ball game. But
yeah,
I've only done that for 5 years. Well, I think 6 years. So but you have to have this compassion, and it's strange because they know exactly who has it and who doesn't have it.
right,
And so it's like it's not a spoken thing. Like the patient will be bad for certain people, and then you'll come on, and if you have just a certain demeanor, there it's like they know, oh, she gets it, or she's kind, or whatever,
yeah. And I don't want to sound like, like my wife, she loves her students. From the
Yeah,
ones who are perfect to the ones who give her the most trouble. Loves
right.
each and every one of them. And but the adage with all the teachers here is, after the first day, they have so many hopes, and the teachers have so many hopes and dreams on day one.
Yes.
day two and beyond, they're playing defense, and that's all that they're doing.
Right.
And it's
It's
the big
true.
thing out here, it's not really a joke. It's a sad truth is we have out here what's called a STAR test. It's it's the
Mhm.
state regulated test, and all
Yeah.
the teachers know instead of doing it the way that they want to do it, they teach to the test basically.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. They
and
have to.
they have to because that's what the teachers agree
Hmm.
to, and
Yep.
that comes down from the district, which gets it from the state, which gets it from so and so and so and so and so and so.
Yep.
It's so
Yep.
hard for them. It's hard to see that it's this is what they do.
Yep. And that's exactly, they do the same thing here. It's called something different. I think it's like dibbles or something like
Yeah,
that. But same thing. And with my daughter, she has no, it's always on a computer. And I'm like,
yeah.
she doesn't retain anything on a computer. It's really hard for her.
And
And they're like, well, sorry, you
some of these
know.
kids get so stressed about it as well. Like
Yeah.
they make
Yeah.
themselves physically sick, the days before. And there's kids who like their hair's falling out because they're so stressed, or their stomachs and knots and
Right.
throwing up and they can't do things. It's just, it goes back to again, like you were talking about with empathy. The teachers have so much empathy, but at the same time, the teachers are up
They're
against,
held. Yeah. They're
yeah,
held
they're
to a
held accountable
certain.
to these things as well. And it's like, and it's
Oh,
that way
yeah.
with
That's
everything. It's
with
not,
everything.
yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
sure it's that way with you with being a nurse as well.
Oh,
You've got
yeah.
empathy for your patients, but empathy means you're going to spend more time with your patient, which means your 8-hour shift turns into a 12-hour shift because you're adding,
Yeah.
10 minutes to each of your patients or whatever, and it's just
Well, and they don't even allow us. They're like, oh, okay, we know you work in psych. Okay, psych nurses usually work there because they've had some problem. Okay. Like nobody wants to work there. Like it's kind of a niche where you're like, okay, you've either had trauma, known somebody that had trauma, blah, 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 right? Because you have to know how that feels to kind of give good care. So most of us do, like either had a brother or sister or family member, whatever, ourselves has had some issue. So they tell us, well, don't share your experiences. You're not a therapist. I'm like, okay. Oh, and don't pray with them or like put your, views on them or like try and help anything. And don't touch them because that might be make them feel weird. And, like if you were to hold their hand, like,
yeah,
so everything is so like we can fist bump, but we can't even do we can I think we can do a side pat. But we one time I had a patient and just wanted a hug,
yep,
and they're like, nope, boundaries, boundaries.
yeah,
And
yeah. You
it's
get that at
hard, but
you get that at the
I
school
know
level as
why.
well.
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
why. I mean, but it's still hard, and same thing for teachers. Teachers have had people that have stalked them or weird stuff, and I get it. And I know that's what they're trying to protect us from, but at the same time, I'm like, I became a nurse because I wanted to help people, but now I just chart,
yeah,
and a lot of times I'll stop and do things anyways. Like if somebody asks me to pray with them, I will pray with them. And I'm like, well, they videotape everything, so I'm sure
right.
eventually I'll get called in, but it is what it is. I'm not gonna not. It's not my idea. If they come to me, I'm not gonna turn somebody away.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
too hard for
and just think we're probably in a simulation anyway, so it's already written with them.
me.
So
Yeah, true. Well, I mean, it's all just wild to me, like how much is beyond our control. Like
right.
really, it is weird. I mean, granted, we can take hold of what we can take hold of, but a lot of times it does really feel like some things are just set.
Oh, very, yeah,
Eh, but
yeah.
kind of like a choose your own ending story more, I guess. Like there's two ways because you always have choice, but like
Right.
not 10 ways. There's like two ways. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but and you hope you always choose correctly. But if you don't, here's the thing: we're all fallible. We all fall short of the glory of God each and every day. And I really encourage people to be more graceful. Quit being so easily offended. If I could give any advice for anybody, try not to be so easily offended and try not to do rash things like, oh, well, this and this and this. So I'm going to unfriend them on Facebook right now. And I'm like, maybe not. Maybe you should wait a minute. What if they're just having a bad day and it really
Right.
isn't because I've had days like that where maybe I wasn't very nice that day or something, and the next day's better, but then it becomes this huge thing that you can't surpass, you know. I don't
I've
know.
gotten to the point to where, and this is what I try to tell people, is understand the energy that you're putting out there. Good
Yes.
energy, bad energy, whatever it is. We are definitely in an energy toroidal field.
Absolutely.
This everything is built on energy and vibration, and just understand what you're putting into it. If you're arguing with somebody on Instagram or Facebook,
Yeah.
or whatever, like,
Trolls
yeah,
on
but
Facebook. Yeah.
how much energy is that sucking from you? You
So
know,
true.
what could you do to go actually raise your energy, raise your vibrational frequency
Yes.
versus what you're doing, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Put the
And it's
phone down.
designed that way.
Oh,
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
I think
And then like
I think
it already naturally happens to a lot of people. Like some people are empaths or some people just are different than others. So like my son said to me the other day, we went to amusement park and it's fun. We love to go. But he looked at me halfway through and he said, when you're out, do you ever just feel like so exhausted? And I said, what do you mean? Like from walking around? And he's like, no, just from all the people. And
yeah.
I was like, I get it, and I
Have you
told him,
ever
you got to put your armor of God on every day. Because if
have you
you
ever
don't,
also have you ever called somebody and they answer the phone and say, I was just thinking about you.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
just thinking, that's,
absolutely.
and if it happens
Yes,
once, that's a coincidence, maybe even twice,
right.
but it happens
Consistent.
so
Yeah,
many times. It's like there's a there.
right.
There's something there.
Something. Yep.
I may not be
And
able
they
to tell you
feed
exactly
off
what
of
it
it.
is.
Well,
Yeah.
and they're constantly trying to irritate us. Like, I mean, and I say they, the powers that be, because of course we don't know the real names because real gangsters, you ain't gonna know their
You ain't
names.
gonna
Like,
know their
come
names.
on. Yeah, let's be real. Like, who really runs the mob? Nobody
Right.
knows. Like,
Nobody.
because they're smart. But I'm like, here's the thing is whatever you have inside you, also remember you can't just give and give and give and give because
Right.
eventually you're going to be out. Like I always think of gas, like you give gasoline, you're going to, there's not an unlimited amount. You're going to have to figure out what fills you up,
Yeah,
because some
absolutely.
people are drains and that's not good necessarily. It's okay sometimes. Maybe they're going through something or whatever, but if it's all the time, consistent
Yeah.
negativity,
If they understand that they're a drain or like what they're doing
yep,
might be draining, but if they just kind of come up to you and they're just every time they
constant.
load on you, it's like
Yep.
I'm tired. I'm not even
Yeah.
going to go through this. I'm tired.
Right. Yeah. And then you know that it's just going to end up the same way every single, like you're
Right.
like, oh man, I don't want to talk to them today. Those
Yep.
kind of conversations and it's for a reason, but they do these kind of things in general to like harness that energy. It really is like that negative. I always think of Monsters Inc., where they like are
Yeah.
harnessing the screams of the kids. And I'm like,
So
and
much
at the
truth in
end,
movies.
yeah. Oh, they tell us that's revelation of the method 100% because they have to. I
Yep.
mean, if you're going to get into the law, they have to abide by laws too,
Yeah,
you
you're one of the
know?
few people I've heard talk about that. I know because
Yes.
I'm on the same thing you are, that there's under whatever law, whether it's God, whether it's
Yes.
law of the universe, whether it's Inky and
Mm-hmm.
Innu, whatever, like they
Yep.
have to tell you. So, but usually they tell you in the most asinine ways, other than movies
Right. Yeah.
or
They make it
movies
seem ridiculous so that you won't believe it,
or movies that
like,
nobody's going to watch, like the straight to
yeah.
DVD movies.
Exactly, a bit like the worst B movie.
Right.
But I mean but they also like people are so fearful, and I don't know if are you Christian? Whatever you are, you understand Christianity is what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your basis for Christianity, you got a good concept on it. Okay. So whatever it is that makes you understand that, you have to understand as above, so below. I don't care what your pastor says. I don't care what anyone says. If you don't know both sides, like I always say football, if you're going to, or hockey, you're going to go play a team, you're going to watch their reels. You're going to watch their games. You're going to study their crap. Why? Because if you don't know both sides, that means the bad and the good,
Yep.
then you're going to lose. And so a lot of times when I bring up in like the Christian stuff, I'll bring up things that are like Aleister Crowley, like the as above, so below, or this and that,
Right.
and like different things that are occult, because I'm like, you do know that the same person, King James, that made the King James Bible, he made a book on demonology as well. Why? Why?
Yeah.
Because he didn't make anything. He just put it together. It was already done. So if it was important enough for him to actually scribe out and bind together a book about all the Christian stuff, and he did exactly the same for all the evil stuff, maybe you ought to be wise to that, because
Right.
there are no accidents. They're trying to tell you something,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
know. And whether
Absolutely.
you believe in Christianity per se or not, it's still energy. It's
Yeah.
still like good and bad energy. And so you have to know what you're doing. You have to be able to protect yourself. How are you going to do that if you don't know what you're up against?
Yeah. I was lucky enough to play baseball all the way up through college, and we always had a scouting report on the pitcher we were facing. He always starts off first pitch fastball, or,
Right.
first pitch, look for something off speed,
You
or
know, you know
yeah,
their stuff.
you
Yeah.
know their stuff, and they have the same thing on us. Like this, he's a
Mm-hmm.
fastball hitter. Don't give him anything low and inside, or whatever.
Right.
They would study, because again, like Sun Tzu said, you have to know your enemy.
Yes. And if we can understand it, like you just explained it to me, you could explain that to anybody in sports and they would be like, yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's totally makes sense. But
right.
if you went and told a Christian you should be studying about demons, they'd be like, you're crazy. And I
And
get that look sometimes when I'm in the Christian, you couldn't see it
I think
on the
99
one
I think 99% of
show.
pastors will tell them not to. They
Yeah,
tell their
they tell them
congregation.
it's dangerous. Yeah.
The church we were going to, they told us, he basically said, don't read anything about your Bible.
Nope.
Don't read, don't look at anything else, don't read anything else. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
No,
Because
because it doesn't. How are you going to figure anything out?
because Paul quoted from things that were extra biblical as well,
And what about those canons? Like the canons that they didn't put in the Bible are just as important. I'm not saying they're the word, but they are important because they wouldn't be written if they weren't. And many of them have Dead Sea Scrolls found later to support them, just like the Bible, but yet they never added them in the canon. Why?
I
Because it's
go,
the stuff they don't want you to know.
it's the same thing I ask people, do you think the government has your best interest at heart? Do you trust the Catholic Church explicitly? No.
No.
Well, guess who was really in charge of the Bible when it first happened, and gathering all the books, and who has archives that's like 17 miles long?
Oh,
What do you think they're hiding
so
down there?
much is missing.
So
So much is missing. We only get, I think, if we're honest, we probably have not even a thumbnail of knowledge considering what we really need to know
oh,
on both.
absolutely.
Yeah, because I've been
Absolutely.
to the Vatican and it's insane, the size and everything. Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming.
Right. Well,
And
and then you've got
yeah.
the building that the Pope sits in that looks like a serpent's head.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's so much stuff. And what did they say in the end days? That the church will help bring it to, that they will help bring the Antichrist to power. The church. That's in there. So I always tell people, like, even though my life was hard, even though I was in Mormonism, even though all this weird stuff, people are like, well, you didn't leave all the way, because a lot of people, when they leave, they become atheists. And they say, how did that not happen to you? You didn't have a lot of other people in your life, that weren't
Yeah.
Christian when I was young. I did later. And I would say, because I always knew who God was, because I felt it. It wasn't what someone told me or what I read or any of that crap. As a little kid, desperate and in desperate situation, I knew there was something else.
Right.
And you have to get to that point. That's why I always say to people, God's not in a building. They make such a big deal about church. That's what one of the reasons why I have the mountains on my logo, and why I call it Unfiltered Rise, because
Right.
the mountains are church for me. I love the mountains. Maybe that's not for somebody else. Maybe they love the ocean, whatever. It's fine. But for me, that's where it is. That's where I feel the most with God, and
Yeah.
and that's what I do. And I will never belong to another church roster.
Well,
I might go,
you know what they
but I
call those
won't.
people who worship God in nature? They call them pagans. You're a
Yeah,
pagan
I
now.
know. I'm a little bit. But I believe only in the Bible. So that's good. But I do
Right.
think we should be armed with all the knowledge. I don't think that just because I only believe in the Bible doesn't mean I don't think things are missing. It
Right.
doesn't mean I don't think things are hidden. It doesn't mean I don't, because I've been fooled before. See?
Right.
So I know that all I can do is take what I do have and study the things that they have. Like,
Right.
you have to know what you're up against, because if I had known some of the stuff about OTO, I wouldn't have been doing weird stuff in the church at the temple ceremony, because I would have known it was part of a Gnostic mass, and I don't think I would have chose to do that.
Were you married at the temple?
I was, yes.
Was. So you
Mhm.
could go, your husband could go to his own planet and you have a bunch of wives.
No, not this husband, but my
No,
ex-husband.
your
Yeah,
ex. That's, yeah, that
yeah.
husband.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. He probably wants that still. That's why we broke up. He was already trying to play that number, but I was like,
Right.
nah. But yeah, I mean, you know, anything that any person gives you and stamps church on it, you better really examine it,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's too many people like leading other people astray for their own will.
Well, and
Like, oh, yeah.
if you could know the truth, there wouldn't be 700 denominations alone in
Mm-mm.
the Christian,
Yep.
just alone in the, and I'm not including Mormons or Catholics or
No,
all these other
just
ones. I'm talking like
Christianity. Yeah.
Southern Baptist, Second Baptist, First
Hmm.
Southern Baptist, Anabaptist, Northern Baptist, blah blah blah. All these
Wild.
others, there's like, if the truth was readily available to us, there you wouldn't have that. But instead, you've got all these denominations saying, we've got the right track. We'll show you how to worship God.
We know. Yeah,
We
we know the
know.
truth.
We know.
Well, and here's the thing. If you really study something with a true heart, and you are in just the Bible, nothing else, no other thing, study it, pray about it, think about it, ponder on it. It doesn't say we're just supposed to read it and be like, okay, I read that. That's great.
Right. You're supposed to be
That's
a.
not, it's the
It's called.
living word.
You're supposed to be the Bible says you're supposed to be a Berean. You're supposed to, daily, daily be in it and challenge what you believe and back it up. And that's the, um, I
That's
just,
what I loved about Paul. Paul was just,
yeah,
I loved Paul because it was such a weird story, like for him to be what he was and turned into what he became, and then to study everything he studied and turn it all around. Like, that's an amazing story.
yeah,
And that can be any of us. And I don't care if somebody tells you you have to do ABCD. That's not true. Figure out inside yourself. It's the living word for a reason. And I don't read it. I think everyone should read it in its entirety at least once. But like, when I go to study, I don't do that. I don't pick up where I left off last time. I pray and I just open it, because there's usually a little message in there for me for that day. And maybe another day it will be the same thing, but it will mean something different that day, you
yeah,
know? And I mean, that's just for me and my testimony, but I just feel like people discount that so heavily that it has to be like, well, I can't read the scriptures right now because I'm not doing this and this and this, or I can't do this right now because I'm not perfect in every way. Like, you're going to waste a lot of time. You're never going to get there. Not like that.
no,
You know,
no,
you just gotta, God loves us no matter what. I always try and tell people, like, think of your kids or think of something that you love. If you don't have kids, like an animal or anything, how much you have love for your parent or whatever, and times that by infinity. Like, it's that much, and you're that important. So, like, do you really think that you are nothing? We're just nothing here. I don't believe that, you know.
yeah, I do. I do. Well,
It's
I
it's
think
that's me.
I think that's a good place to end it for tonight.
You got
We
it.
could probably go for 2 or 3 more hours, but
Yeah, I'm a chatty girl.
yeah, but see, if we do everything all at once, I can't have you back on again.
There you go.
We'll break this up into like 3 1.5 hour segments or something like
There
that.
we go. Sounds good
Well,
to me.
so real quick, we covered a whole bunch,
We
but
did. We went all over the
you
place.
did, if you could wrap it up in maybe a couple sentences or a paragraph, and then just kind of give us a
Perfect.
elevator pitch on how to get out of it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I am Heidi Love. I'm at the Unfiltered Rise. I'm wherever podcasts are serviced. I'm also at unfilteredrise@gmail. If you have a story you want to send me, I'm on Facebook, all the socials, Instagram, TikTok, just everything. I'm not on X because I was never a Twitter person and I just haven't done it. So that one's a whole nother story too, but whatever. I'm on YouTube as of now. I hope to be able to stay there. I'm actually really, really glad that I've been able to be led into this situation where I can speak out to people and hopefully help people in their everyday lives. And that is my main goal because I never planned to do podcasting, but yet here I am. So it was kind of an accident. But
Well, no, honestly, check her out. Like she said, you can find her on however you listen to them. She's got a lot of great guests, a lot of great points of views. Maybe comes at it from a way that a lot of people don't, just the way she thinks, being a nurse, everything like that. And on that, I'm John the Fed. This is How the Hell Did We Wind Up Here podcast. And thanks for listening.
do you want?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. I was gonna say I can just add it on the bottom. Just send me your stuff too, and I'll put it in the show notes.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that. Absolutely.
All right, awesome. Thanks
right.
again.
Yeah, thank
Have
you.
a
I'll
good
talk to
one.
you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I got her, Alicia. I'll take her out.